The room went silent the moment the billionaire's hand froze midair. In a hall full of power, money, and flashing cameras, one slap landed and changed every life watching. The sound echoed louder than any speech, exposing arrogance, secrets, and a truth no one expected. The woman he struck didn't cry. She stood tall, her eyes burning with dignity. Guests gasped, alliances shattered, and whispers turned into outrage. Within seconds, the billionaire realized this wasn't just a mistake. It was the beginning of his downfall. One impulsive moment turned wealth into shame and power into regret forever. The ballroom of the Grand Aurelius Hotel glowed like a monument to excess. Crystal chandeliers dripping light, marble floors polished to mirror perfection, and a crowd dressed in wealth so refined it felt rehearsed. This was the world Victor Harrington ruled. A billionaire whose name alone bent rooms into obedience. Victor moved to the gala with the casual authority of a man who believed consequences were for other people. His tailored tuxedo fit like armor, his jaw set with impatience, his eyes sharp and dismissive. Tonight was supposed to be flawless, an anniversary celebration of his empire, a gathering of investors, politicians, and elites who existed in his orbit. What Victor didn't expect was that one moment, one impulsive act, would unravel years of carefully constructed power. At the edge of the ballroom stood a young black woman in a simple black dress, her posture straight but tense, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. She didn't belong to Victor's world of diamonds and arrogance. At least, that's what he assumed. Her name was Leah Monroe, though Victor didn't know it then. She had arrived quietly, not as a guest, not as staff, but as someone summoned by a truth too heavy to ignore. Her eyes scanned the room with cautious resolve, searching for a familiar face that refused to appear. She had been told Victor Harrington would be here. She had been told he needed to see her. What she wasn't prepared for was the violence of his ignorance. Victor noticed her because she didn't fit in a room curated to reflect his success. She was an anomaly, too still, too watchful, too real. His irritation flared instantly. He mistook her silence for defiance, her presence for intrusion. With long, determined strides, he crossed the marble floor, ignoring the whispers trailing behind him. Guests turned, sensing the shift in the air. Victor stopped in front of Aaliyah, towering over her, his shadow swallowing her calm. "Who let you in here?" he demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. Aaliyah met his gaze, her heartbeat thunderous but her voice steady. "I'm here to see you." That answer ignited something ugly in him. People didn't speak to Victor Harrington like that. Not without fear, not without permission. He saw only disrespect, only challenge. The years of unchecked power had trained his instincts to dominate first, ask later. "You don't belong here," he snapped. "Security." Before anyone could move, Aaliyah took a breath. "Victor Harrington, you need to listen to me." That was when it happened. The slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Victor's hand struck her face with a force born of entitlement, not rage, an automatic reaction from a man who believed the world existed to obey him. Aaliyah staggered back, the taste of blood blooming in her mouth, her cheek burning, her vision blurring for just a second. The room froze. Crystal glasses paused midair. Conversations died on lips. Even the music seemed to shrink away in shame. For a heartbeat, Victor felt nothing, no regret, no doubt. Then he saw her face fully. Not the defiance he expected. Not fear, but recognition. Pain layered with something deeper. Something familiar. Aaliyah straightened slowly, her hand trembling as it touched her cheek. Her eyes locked onto his, not with hatred, but with a devastating clarity that made Victor's chest tighten. She looked like someone he had seen before. Someone from another life. A face woven into old memories he had buried under money and pride. "You really don't recognize me," she said softly. Her voice carried across the silent room, heavier than any accusation. Victor frowned, confusion flickering behind his eyes. He searched her features again, the curve of her eyes, the set of her mouth. A chill crept down his spine. Before he could speak, a woman screamed. Victor, his wife, Evelyn Harrington, stood frozen near the stage, her champagne glass shattered on the floor. Her face had drained of color, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She stared at Aaliyah as if seeing a ghost. "No," Evelyn whispered. "Oh, God, no." Victor turned sharply. "Evelyn, what is this?" Evelyn didn't answer him. She walked toward Aaliyah, each step heavy, as though the floor itself resisted her. Tears welled in her eyes before she even reached her. "Aaliyah," she breathed. At the sound of her name, Aaliyah's composure finally cracked. Her lips trembled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Hello, sister." The word slammed into Victor like a blow to the chest. "Sister," he repeated, his voice hollow. The room erupted into whispers, shock rippling through the crowd. Cameras lifted. Phones appeared. The perfect night fractured beyond repair. Victor felt the ground shift beneath him as understanding crept in, slow, merciless. Evelyn turned to him, her eyes blazing with pain and fury. "This is my younger sister," she said. "The one I told you about. The one you said didn't matter." Victor's mind raced, memories colliding, dismissed conversations, ignored details, moments he hadn't bothered to remember. He had never cared enough to ask, never cared enough to see. "I didn't know," he stammered. Aaliyah let out a bitter laugh, tears finally spilling. "No," she said. "You didn't care to know." The weight of his action crashed down on him all at once. The slap replayed in his mind, over and over, now stripped of arrogance and drenched in shame. For the first time in years, Victor Harrington felt something dangerously unfamiliar: fear. Not of scandal, not of loss, but of himself. Security hovered uncertainly. Guests stared openly now. Evelyn stood between her husband and her sister, a line drawn not just on a marble floor, but across her marriage. "You hit my sister," Evelyn said, her voice breaking, in front of everyone. Victor opened his mouth, but no words came. The man who controlled markets, and men stood helpless, exposed. His empire suddenly felt small compared to the damage he had inflicted in a single second. Aaliyah wiped her tears, her posture regaining its strength. "I came here to tell you the truth," she said, "about our family, about what you helped destroy without ever knowing. But now," she looked at him one last time, "now you'll listen." The music never resumed. The celebration was over. And as Victor Harrington stared at the woman he had struck, his wife's sister, a living reminder of everything he had ignored, he realized this was only the beginning of a reckoning far greater than any loss of money or status. Silence lingered in the ballroom long after the last echo of Aaliyah's words faded. It wasn't the quiet of peace. It was a suffocating stillness that followed an explosion, when everyone was afraid to breathe too loudly in case the damage became real. Victor Harrington stood frozen at the center of it all, his hands still half raised as if the air itself had betrayed him. The confidence that once filled his posture drained away, replaced by a stiffness he couldn't control. Around him, faces watched not with admiration but judgment. For the first time in decades, Victor felt naked. Evelyn broke the silence first. "Everyone," she said, her voice trembling yet commanding. "This event is over." Her words sliced cleanly through the room. Staff hurried into motion. Guests exchanged glances, some pretending concern, others savoring the scandal. Phones were lowered reluctantly, though Victor knew the damage was already spreading beyond these walls. Reputation traveled faster than truth in his world. As the crowd slowly dispersed, Evelyn turned back to Aaliyah. The sisters stood inches apart, years of separation pressing down between them. Evelyn reached out hesitantly, her fingers brushing Aaliyah's sleeve like she feared she might vanish. "I didn't know you would come like this," Evelyn whispered. Aaliyah exhaled sharply. "I didn't plan to," she replied, "but I'm tired of being silent." Victor watched them, a stranger in his own life. He had heard Evelyn mention a sister years ago, briefly, dismissively. A painful past, she had said. He hadn't asked questions. He had been too busy building empires to care about roots. "Come with me," Evelyn said softly. "Please." They moved toward a private lounge at the far end of the hall, velvet doors closing behind them. Victor followed, his steps heavy, unsure whether he was allowed to be there, but knowing he couldn't walk away. Not now. The room was dim, lit by warm amber lamps that softened nothing. Aaliyah stood near the window, staring out the city skyline, its lights glittering like distant stars. Victor leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of how large and intrusive he seemed. "You still don't recognize me," Aaliyah said without turning around. Victor swallowed. "You were young," he said weakly. "I've never seen—" "That's the problem," she cut in. "You never looked." Evelyn closed her eyes, tears slipping free. "Aaliyah, I tried to protect you," she said. "I thought if I left that life behind—" "You left me behind," Aaliyah snapped, turning now, her eyes blazing. "You married into power, wealth, comfort, and I stayed with the consequences." Victor felt the accusation pierce him, though it wasn't aimed directly at him. "What consequences?" he asked. Aaliyah laughed bitterly. "Ask your wife." Evelyn sank into a chair, her strength crumbling. "Our father," she began, her voice barely audible, "was ruined, not by fate, by a deal signed by Harrington Industries." Victor's breath caught. "That was decades ago," he said. "I was barely, but you benefited," Aaliyah said. "Your company swallowed his land, his business, his dignity. He died believing his daughters were failures." The word struck Victor harder than any blow. He knew the deal, one of thousands, an acquisition approved without a second thought. To him, it had been numbers on a page. To them, it had been a life erased. "I stayed," Aaliyah continued. "I watched him fall apart. I watched him die angry and broken while you celebrated success built on his loss." Evelyn sobbed openly now. "I was scared," she said. "I thought staying would destroy us both." "So you chose to survive alone," Aaliyah replied quietly. Victor felt something crack inside him, something long hardened by profit and control. "I didn't know," he said again, but the words tasted hollow. "Not knowing doesn't erase responsibility," Aaliyah said. "Power doesn't excuse blindness." A long silence followed. Outside, the city pulsed, indifferent to their pain. Victor straightened, his voice lower now, stripped of authority. "What do you want?" he asked. "Money? An apology? Justice?" Aaliyah met his gaze, unflinching. "I want the truth acknowledged," she said. "I want the world to see what your success cost. And I want my sister back." Evelyn looked up, hope and fear tangled in her expression. Victor realized then that this wasn't just a family fracture. It was a reckoning aimed directly at him. His company, his reputation, his marriage. Everything stood on the edge of collapse. "You humiliated her tonight," Evelyn said softly, turning to him. "You humiliated me." Victor nodded slowly. "I know." No defense came. No justification. The slap replayed in his mind again, but now it carried faces, names, histories. He had crossed a line that money couldn't erase. "I will make this right," he said finally. Aaliyah's expression hardened. "You can't fix this," she replied. "You can only face it." A knock sounded at the door. Victor's assistant peeked in nervously. "Sir, the press is asking questions." Victor closed his eyes. "Tell them the truth," he said. "All of it." The assistant hesitated, stunned, then nodded and left. Evelyn stared at Victor, as if seeing him for the first time. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No," he admitted, "but I'm done hiding." Aaliyah watched him closely, searching for deception. "Words are easy," she said. "We'll see what you do when it costs you everything." Victor understood then. This wasn't a momentary scandal. This was the beginning of dismantling a legacy built without accountability. As the sisters stood side by side, the distance between them slowly narrowing, Victor felt the full weight of his actions settle onto his shoulders. He had struck a woman he didn't know. But worse, he had ignored the humanity of people whose lives were bound to his own. Outside that room, the world waited eagerly for his fall. And for the first time, Victor Harrington didn't try to stop it. Morning broke without mercy. Sunlight poured through the glass walls of the Harrington penthouse, illuminating a night that had ended without sleep, forgiveness, or resolution. Victor Harrington stood alone by the window, the city he once ruled stretching endlessly beneath him. For years, this view had been his sanctuary, a reminder of dominance, success, invincibility. Now it felt like an accusation. Every building reflected a story he had never asked to hear. Behind him, the penthouse was silent. Evelyn had locked herself in the guest suite. Aaliyah had refused to stay under the same roof, choosing instead a modest hotel across town. That decision alone wounded Victor more deeply than any headline ever could. And the headlines were everywhere. By sunrise, the incident had gone viral. Billionaire assaults woman at gala. Victim revealed as wife's sister. Power, privilege, and violence. Harrington exposed Victor's phone buzzed endlessly. Board members, investors, lawyers, PR executives, all speaking at once, all demanding control. He ignored them for the first time in his career. Control felt meaningless. At 9 sharp, his legal counsel arrived anyway. "This is catastrophic," said Leonard Graves, pacing the living room. "Assault charges are possible. Civil liability is guaranteed. The optics are lethal." Victor didn't turn around. "Did she file a complaint?" "Not yet," Leonard replied. "But she doesn't have to. The footage," I said. Victor interrupted quietly. "Did she file?" Leonard hesitated. "No," Victor nodded slowly. That single mercy cut deeper than any threat. "Then stop talking like this is a business problem," he said. "It's not." Leonard stared at him, unsettled. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Victor replied, finally turning around, "that I won't bury this. No settlements. No silence clauses." Leonard paled. "That could destroy you." Victor held his gaze. "Good." By noon, Victor requested a private meeting with Aaliyah. She agreed, but on her terms. They met at a small community center on the south side of the city, a place Victor had never stepped foot in before. The walls were lined with murals. Faces of black leaders, children, families, stories of resilience painted in bold color. The contrast to his polished boardrooms was unsettling. Aaliyah waited for him in a quiet office, seated calmly, dressed simply. No makeup concealed the faint bruise on her cheek. She hadn't tried to hide it. Victor noticed immediately. "I won't apologize again," he said after a long pause. "Not because I'm not sorry, but because words won't touch what I did." Aaliyah studied him carefully. "Then why are you here?" "Because I need to understand," he said. "Not for redemption. For truth." She leaned back slightly. "Understanding doesn't change the past." "No," Victor agreed, "but it decides the future." Silence settled between them. Then Aaliyah spoke, not with anger, but with exhaustion. "When our father lost everything, I was 16, she said. I watched a strong black man crumble under a system that didn't see him as human, just expendable. Evelyn escaped that reality. I lived inside it." Victor clenched his fists. "You built an empire from transactions like that," she continued. "Deals signed in air-conditioned rooms while families suffocated. I didn't intend." "Intent doesn't matter," she cut in. "Impact does." The words landed with surgical precision. Victor nodded. "Then let me face the impact." Aaliyah stood and walked to a filing cabinet, pulling out a thick folder. She placed it on the desk between them. "These are cases," she said. "Families, businesses, land seized, lives destroyed by Harrington Industries. I work with them now. I fight for them." Victor opened the folder. Names, photos, stories, faces that mirrored the pain he had ignored for decades. "You want me to shut my company down?" he asked quietly. "No," Aaliyah replied. "I want you to change how power works. Starting publicly. Starting now." That afternoon, Victor did something no one expected. He called a press conference. Not a statement. Not a controlled interview. A full live address. The world watched as Victor Harrington stood behind a plain podium. No logo. No shield of branding. His face was unguarded. His voice steady, but stripped of arrogance. "I assaulted a woman," he said. "A black woman. My wife's sister. There is no excuse." Gasps rippled across newsrooms worldwide. "My company has caused harm," he continued, "and I benefited from that harm without question. Today, that changes. Stock prices plummeted in real time. I am stepping down as CEO, effective immediately." Evelyn watched from home, tears streaming down her face. Not from relief, but from the weight of everything finally spoken aloud. Victor ended the address with words that would echo far beyond that day. Power without accountability is violence, he said. And I've been violent for too long. That evening, Evelyn returned to the penthouse, not to reconcile, but to confront. You chose the world over us again, she said quietly. Victor shook his head. No, he replied. For the first time, I chose responsibility. Evelyn studied him, conflicted. I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't expect you to, Victor said. I just won't lie anymore. Elsewhere in the city, Aaliyah watched the broadcast surrounded by community leaders, activists, and families who had never believed justice could wear a billionaire's face. One of them turned to her. Do you trust him? Aaliyah exhaled slowly. No, she said, but I'll hold him accountable. As night fell, Victor Harrington sat alone in the darkened penthouse. No calls, no assistance, no empire to command. Just memory, just consequence. For the first time in his life, power wasn't protecting him. It was bleeding. The city did not forgive Victor Harrington. Days turned into weeks, and the world did what it always did when a powerful man fell. It devoured the spectacle. News cycles dissected his confession. Analysts debated whether his resignation was genuine or strategic. And critics called it too little, too late. Harrington Industries lost contracts, investors fled, and once friendly allies disappeared without a word. The penthouse emptied, the staff released, the phones finally silent. For the first time since his rise to power, Victor lived without an audience. He moved into a modest apartment across town, far from the skyline that once crowned him. There were no doormen who knew his name, no drivers waiting at the curb. Just ordinary mornings, unanswered questions, and a mirror that reflected a man he barely recognized. Evelyn filed for separation. She did it quietly, without lawyers or headlines, but the distance cut deeper than any public condemnation. They met once in a small cafe, sitting across from each other like strangers bound by history. I need to find out who I am without your shadow, she said, her voice steady but tired. And you need to live with what you've done, without me protecting you from it. Victor nodded. I understand. She studied him for a long moment. I don't hate you, she said finally, but love can't survive denial. When she left, Victor didn't follow. Instead, he did the work. Not publicly, not performatively. Quietly, he began attending the community center where Aaliyah worked, not as a benefactor, not as a speaker, but as a listener. He sat in folding chairs among families who had lost homes, businesses, futures. He heard their stories without interruption, without defense. Each one carved something out of him, hollowing the arrogance he once wore like armor. Aaliyah never shielded him. When he spoke, she challenged him. When he faltered, she corrected him. When he tried to help too quickly, she reminded him that repair required patience. You don't get to rush healing, she told him one evening. Especially not when you cause a wound. He accepted that. Months passed. Legal proceedings moved forward. Victor pled guilty to assault. He did not contest it. The sentence was light by the standards of the law, but heavy by the standards of his former life. Community service, mandatory counseling, public accountability forums where victims spoke and he listened. The bruise on Aaliyah's face faded. The memory did not. One afternoon, after a long meeting with displaced families, Aaliyah and Victor sat outside the center as the sun dipped low. Children laughed nearby, their joy unburdened by the past. Do you ever wish you could go back? Victor asked quietly. Aaliyah shook her head. No, I wish you had seen us sooner, but going back wouldn't teach you how to see now. He nodded. I'm still learning. She looked at him carefully. Learning is a redemption, she said, but it's a start. Years later, Harrington Industries existed again, but it was unrecognizable. Worker-owned divisions, community oversight, reparative investments directed by those once harmed. Victor held no executive power. He served on no boards. His name was not celebrated. It was simply present, attached to responsibility, not dominance. One evening, at a small family gathering, Evelyn and Aaliyah stood side by side, their bond repaired not by wealth, but by honesty. Victor arrived late, unsure of his place. Evelyn met his eyes, offered a small nod, not forgiveness, not rejection, just acknowledgement. It was enough. As the night deepened, Victor stepped outside alone. The city lights were distant now, no longer something he ruled. They were just lights, shared countless human. He thought of the slap, the sound that had shattered everything. And what followed: truth, loss, accountability, change. Power had once made him blind. Now, seeing had cost him everything. And in that cost, he had finally learned what it meant to be human.